In Resident Evil 4 OG, when Leon gets to the ruins, Krauser asks him if he and Ada are working together now as a continuation of what happened earlier where Ada saved Leon from Krauser. Leon, however, actually acts in character and dismisses all that as not only is he not aware of Ada's motivations, but he has to save Ashley. He gets straight into the point with asking Krauser where Ashley was. Krauser is of course surprised, but then tells Leon where she is and that the door out of here requires 3 insignias. He tells him where 2 of the insignias are, all while not maintaining eye contact with Leon. Leon then correctly deduces that Krauser has the last insignia, playing once again into the former partnership these two had. Leon certainly catches on quicker than expected compared to his Resident Evil 4 Remilk counterpart. This entire setup in the ruins clearly has a personal taste to it, personifying Krauser's justified grudge against Leon. As Krauser puts it with great acting,
it pretty much means you're on a tight leash.
Before aiming his TMP, Krauser's voice actor in Resident Evil 4 OG is amazing. He doesn't need to yell or exaggerate his quotes to a stupid extreme like the voice actor in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. You can just hear the coldness in his voice, the way he just commands a presence. As one of my subscribers puts it, in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, Krauser sounds like he's trying to be a badass but just comes across as cringe. I totally agree. Leon then responds to Krauser's threat by throwing his grappling hook to delay Krauser before running to cover. Definitely a better showcase of autonomy compared to Remilk Leon not doing anything to open up the fight with Krauser. And this begins Krauser's fight in Resident Evil 4 OG. Krauser opens up the fight by either firing his machine gun or bow and arrow, or by throwing grenades. If he uses his bow and arrow or grenades, you can run for the door. His machine gun, however, is deadly, but by shooting Krauser, he'll get stunned and take cover. This right here is old Capcom not having to rely upon artificial means with Krauser's physiology and actually relying upon common sense. That being said, they do try to encourage you to use the knife by making Krauser not flinch from pistol shots, but I don't see the problem with that when the knife's advantages are properly displayed in the gameplay. And even if Krauser could be stunned, he's really good at evading your shots and disorienting you, and the precise shooting can make hitting a moving target difficult. And if Krauser pulls out his gun and you miss, you're screwed. The incentive to use your knife is actually justified for good or better reasons, but after entering this building, you want to wait for Krauser to come and get you before using your knife. Do not spam the knife slash on him because he'll dodge and attack you before you can hit him. You have to time your knife hits and watch Krauser closely. Every time the knife hits him, it stuns him, which justifies the knife as being an important tool here. I'm sure back when this game was released, people probably didn't realize the advantages of the knife properly. These days, we take that knowledge for granted, but I have a much better appreciation for the knife in this game compared to the pre-alpha. After 3 knife slashes, Krauser retreats, which makes so much sense. The prior fight with him earlier established the lethality of the knife, which is why Krauser had to actively avoid the slashes. This is an example of the cutscenes in the gameplay complementing each other. Krauser retreating after 3 knife slashes complements the prior cutscene, not like in Resident Evil 4 Remilk where we saw plenty of jarring disconnects between the gameplay and cutscenes. The use of 3 knife slashes and the stuns provided by the knife also counteract the rigidity of the tank control based system. Old Capcom actually factored in the fundamental designs to their gameplay when designing the way Krauser reacts and the way he gets stunned. This shows they understood how they designed their game, whereas new Capcom demonstrates time and time again their lack of understanding with how they designed their products, mainly in Resident Evil Village and Resident Evil 4 Remilk, and this leads to broken experiences. Once Krauser retreats, you now enter phase 1.5, which is nowhere near as time consuming as in the Remilk, as this only takes about a minute to do. Krauser will hide behind cover and strike when you get near. He'll throw grenades, he'll use his other weapons, and he'll rush you with the knife. The latter is the option he favors mostly. I gotta say, after playing Resident Evil 4 Remilk, I have a greater appreciation for Krauser not rambling about stuff in the midst of combat. In fact, in terms of writing, the model they favored with OG Krauser is so much better. Because they don't allow Krauser to ramble in the midst of combat, it means that the cutscenes where he has to talk are more likely to have substantial content that is not hindered or contradicted by prior dialogue. The only kind of dialogue spoken by Krauser during the gameplay is when he's telling Leon to run, when he's saying he can see Leon's every move, and when he's praising Leon for doing well. This is all banter, not story, character, or lore-related quotes. It complements the adrenaline Krauser gets from battle, further moderated by Leon giving him a challenge. The hatred Krauser has for Leon has to be complemented by Leon giving his all, as therefore, Krauser's able to view Leon as the same person he hated back in Operation Javier. It certainly has more sense than when Remilk Krauser is complimenting Leon before doing a complete 180 and calling Leon pathetic, and given that Leon was actually in Operation Javier in the canon timeline, Krauser saw how Leon fought, so he's praising Leon for showing a combat prowess just like back in Operation Javier, and also egging him on, through telling him to run or through telling him he's predictable. This kind of hatred makes more sense between peers than between a mentor and and a student. The latter, of course, being done poorly in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. And speaking of non-gameplay elements, can I just say how much I like this music compared to the Remilk? They don't try to deliver overly exaggerated music that doesn't fit the tone of the encounter. The music in Resident Evil 4 OG, which is titled Path to Closure, fits the personal nature to this encounter, and it provides a more menacing and cold tone that complements Krauser's character well. And titling it Path to Closure fits the idea of settling old scores, and it relates to Leon as well, since OG Krauser has ties to BOWs and Wesker, the very things that contributed to Raccoon City's downfall, which was the first time Leon encountered BOWs. There's already more respect shown towards Leon, Krauser, and the overarching narrative than in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. At the start of Phase 2, Leon obtains the first insignia. Krauser approaches from behind, readying his knife. Having already heard about Umbrella earlier from Krauser, Leon asks what he intends to do by restoring Umbrella, to which Krauser says that Umbrella will bring order and balance to this insane world they live in. Leon isn't having any of it, and he calls Krauser a psycho incapable of order or balance. I think it's clear that after careful reflection on Krauser after the events of Operation Javier without him being around, Leon was eventually going to realize that something was off with Krauser, leading to him revoking whatever former ties he had with Krauser. I know I myself have done the same with certain former friends and teachers that I considered good, but after careful reflection, I've come to despise them. There's also this passage from the Kaitai Shinso that confirms this. Krauser was an excellent US agent, and Leon could not think of a more reliable partner to have at his back. They had worked together in espionage, and 2 years ago, a mysterious accident had supposedly claimed his life. To Leon, the appearance of this first-class agent was worse than being attacked by a pack of monsters, but it is no longer a surprise that such ghosts come back to life. In hindsight, it seems there were signs of Krauser's defection even when they were working together. Leon was not an ardent patriot by any means, but he could still sense the discontent and despair that sometimes emerged from within his partner, overshadowing his loyalty to the nation. Leon never forgot the look on Krauser's face as he muttered to himself on the transport plane on the way back that the United States was steering its ship in the wrong direction at a time when terrorism was on the rise and they were constantly rushing to respond. It was reminiscent of the fanatical extremists they had just spent their last mission fighting. So based on this, it's logical for Leon to view Krauser this way now. Krauser then showcases his disdain for the US government by calling them conservative, and that such an outdated mindset can never chart a new course for the world. The use of the term conservative doesn't relate to Krauser's political motivations, but more so in relation to Wesker. Wesker and the rival organization represent a more modern power compared to the US government. Krauser's use of the phrase insane world is justified by his years of working in the military, his hatred for the United States and how they operate, his former superiors treating him like a pawn, Operation Javier, the Illuminados, and his new knowledge through working with Wesker. No doubt Krauser has seen the veil of political manipulation and is also aware of Wesker's context within the United States. Based on what I've mentioned, it's easy for someone like Krauser, who's driven by power, to see Wesker's influence and Umbrella's former influence trump so much of the United States' power in his mind. And given that Wesker healed Krauser's arm and showcased the power of BOWs to him after Operation Javier, it's no wonder Krauser shares the same vision, even if Wesker viewed Krauser as an expendable pawn, no different to Krauser's former superiors. It's also interesting because it plays upon the idea of the United States being on par with a kleptocracy, a viewpoint shared by many. You have no idea how powerful such pharmaceutical corporations are in our world. They can turn the tide of war based on the way they distribute their medical resources, for example. This same kind of power is also the case with health insurance companies in America. These private insurance companies, independent of the US government, literally hold your life in their hands due to their profit-driven goals and deceitful practices, getting in the way of people who can't afford important medical procedures without insurance. People can literally go bankrupt without health insurance. Just go to any news outlet or a YouTube channel like More Perfect Union and see the amount of controversy and evil surrounding these corporations. Terminology like Medicare Advantage, upcoding, falsified diagnoses, and denial of claims are just a couple of examples I can give of terms surrounding the scumminess of these health insurance companies. Why else do you think the term corporate America exists? This concept of corporations having more power than governments is a very interesting concept that ties back to the prior Resident Evil games. And by the way, I'm sure everyone who's watching this doesn't know, but the umbrella that Krauser mentions here was indeed revived. That umbrella was Blue Umbrella in Resident Evil 7. That's right, Resident Evil 7's umbrella connection ties back to many games, as Blue Umbrella became the Umbrella Corporation PMC that Wesker wanted to revive through the rival organization he worked for. The leaders of Blue Umbrella are the former leaders of the rival organization. Resident Evil 7's Blue Umbrella links back to many Resident Evil games, including Resident Evil 2 OG, Resident Evil Code Veronica X, Resident Evil 4 OG, and Umbrella Corps. This whole point that Krauser made about restoring Umbrella was actually followed up on, but I'll elaborate on this point after talking about OG Krauser entirely. This part of Krauser's fight is cool because you can shoot his grenades when he throws them. You can't shoot Krauser's grenades when he throws them in Resident Resident Evil 4 Remilk only with his arrows, and that already is a waste of time with Remilk Krauser. Alongside using grenades, he'll also use his machine gun, which requires you to headshot him. Old Capcom made it where he doesn't immediately fire at you. He fires to the side before turning his machine gun to face you. This once again showcases how old Capcom took into account the way they designed Leon's shooting mechanics before they designed Krauser's attacks. As the shooting mechanics, the slow turning, and the precise aiming can make reacting to Krauser's machine gun impossible if he doesn't fire to the side first. That's actual common sense right there from old Capcom. After he drops down, you just need to knife him for a bit and he'll leave. There's also a moment where Krauser will randomly jump up and start talking with you, allowing you to respond or not. He'll try to egg Leon on to get him to drop his guard, to which Leon will say he's not falling for that one, which then prompts Krauser to mention that he's trying to have fun, which complements what I said earlier about Krauser praising Leon for doing certain actions. That is a nice touch. After getting through a gate, Krauser activates drones to deal with Leon. This right here is yet another example of old Capcom providing links to old Resident Evil games, as these drones aren't just here for the sake of it. As described in the Perfect Capture Guide for Resident Evil 4 OG, they're actually an evolution to the Seeker drones, which were automated surveillance system drones that were tied to the Hunter 2s and the Sweepers in Resident Evil Code Veronica X, which took place from December 27 to December 28 of 1998. In the 6 years since Resident Evil Code Veronica X, it makes sense that the rival organization would make enhancements to the Seekers like this. Old Capcom with Resident Evil just demonstrates to such a degree compared to every other game series how much they care about the overarching narrative of Resident Evil. That is really cool. But with these Seekers, you have to shoot the optics in order to eliminate them. After getting past the drones, Krauser confronts Leon, asking him what he's fighting for, to which Leon says he's fighting for his past. The traumas of Raccoon City and the amount he's seen since joining Adam Benford's organization are what make up his past. Krauser then reaffirms his stance on fighting for the rebirth of Umbrella, which then leads into Phase 3. Once Leon collects the second insignia, Krauser confronts him. His hatred for Leon, his hatred for the US, his reverence for BOWs, and his sharing in Wesker's vision all culminate in this ultimatum, his endgame. Upon throwing his machine gun away, Krauser showcases his mutation. The tone and music make this transformation feel chilling.
Witness the power!
And unlike Remilk Krauser, OG Krauser does not scream like an idiot when saying "witness the power," and does not try to say other dumb things while transforming. He also tells Leon in a short, concise way to prepare for his death before attacking. He doesn't waste time dragging out this statement through poor acting like with Remilk Krauser. And also, given that this is Krauser's endgame, he activates explosives to force Leon to deal with him quickly and put the pressure on him. This time format to Phase 3 is complemented by a perfect amount of HP on Krauser, as well as really good stuns on him. The stuns with the knife are perfect, as when you hit his leg, he always goes into a hard stun. It makes sense for him to hold his arm up in front of him and be as fast as he is if his body is still vulnerable to hard stuns like this. The hard stuns also complement the way the gameplay systems of Resident Evil 4 OG are laid out. The tank control-based system, the rigidity in movement, and the lacking precision with the knife slashes have to be counteracted by these stuns. This is yet again another example of old Capcom actually thinking about their fundamental gameplay systems before coming up with the designs for Krauser's boss fight. It also makes sense logically, as there's nothing about Krauser's physiology that should allow him to artificially hyper armor through your knife slashes. Once again, the incentive to use the knife is encouraged through proper justification rather than through poor justification like in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. A lot of potentially awkward moments with mutated Krauser are mitigated by the well-designed stun systems, whereas in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, it's nothing but awkward gameplay with the number of factors I've discussed before. There actually feels like a real sense of honor with finishing off your fallen comrade with the knife. The general strategy for dealing with mutated Krauser is to aim for his legs and get behind him when he's in the middle of recovering. If he's facing you in a favorable direction that allows you to knife his legs safely from the front, go for it. Try your best not to aim for his head because he will recover very quickly and attack you. He'll also gain access to moves that you can't avoid with a QTE, but usually with those moves, you can stop him by knifing him. After a few knife slashes, he'll go down. I don't care what any of you say. It might look silly to you, but that's irrelevant. It's built within the core designs of the game. Positioning actually matters. Aiming your knife is important and certainly doesn't feel as awkward as in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, and the knife actually stands out here as a mechanic unlike in Remilk Krauser's encounter. The only people who will say otherwise are people who don't give a lot of thought to what they're saying or are too limited with their mindsets. This is a short and sweet encounter. You're not running the gambit with clunky mechanics. You're not listening to crappy acting. You're not seeing Krauser artificially ignore believable stuns. You're not being screwed by bad hitboxes. You're not being screwed by Leon's movement. You are appreciating this fight for what it is, and also the sense of honor with using your knife. And to top it all off, when Leon inspects Krauser's body, he wonders what happened to Krauser, as he used to be a good guy, which serves as added player investment in the context of Darkside Chronicles, where you get to explore Krauser's character. Krauser is honestly the best boss of Resident Evil 4 OG because of a lot of the good designs with him and the story points he lays out to Leon. It still boggles my mind how new Capcom can look at how Krauser was handled in Resident Evil 4 OG, ruin him completely in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, and then say that Remilk Krauser was reborn into something better than the old one. What a horrible disservice to this character. But I mentioned earlier that I'd elaborate on what OG Krauser was talking about with Umbrella. Let me explain. To describe the history of Umbrella's revival and Albert Wesker's contributions, as detailed in the AWMO1 archives, Survive Magazines 15 and 16, and other Resident Evil media, it all began with the emergence of the T-Virus. Because the T-Virus emerged as an agent capable of creating viable and profitable BOWs, Wesker had foreseen a time in the near future where BOWs would eventually reform the very nature of global conflict. Wesker believed that conventional firearms would be replaced by ever-improving biological weapons. Human soldiers would be replaced by organisms and vectors that not only have astounding combat prowess and refined intelligence, but also the capabilities of tactical thinking and following complex orders on the battlefield. Newly engineered viruses would overtake the fear of standard chemical and doomsday weapons, with improved strains surpassing even that of the T-Virus itself. It would become a cyclical arms race with countries, powers, and governments from across the world striving to produce better biological weapons and superior technologies. And given what we've seen in many of the Resident Evil games with the numerous bioterror incidents and outbreaks, this is definitely the case. Wesker had possessed an absolute ambition of standing at the top of the world and surpassing humanity. His own experiences with the special T-Virus variant he injected into himself after it was given to him by William Birkin as part of Project W, which led Wesker to become a very proficient enhanced individual, led him to believe he could realize his ideals. Because of his knowledge of his own capabilities, he had envisioned situations of facing T-Virus equipped enemies or other kinds of BOWs in combat and began exploring countermeasures, breaking down everything from counter combat styles, tactics, and weapons to total anti-BOW suppression. Wesker conducted a lot of private research to discover an abundance of sublime countermeasure tactics against a variety of BOWs. In a war scenario, Wesker had considered neutralizing not only one side's BOWs, but both sides, allowing him to control the direction, result, and overall control of global warfare. He also researched existing firearms and differing ammunition types, wanting to create effective anti-BOW weaponry. One of his more notable achievements was the creation of the Albert 01 pistol from Resident Evil 7, which was based off the Samurai Edge from Resident Evil 1. The rapid-acting mycetotoxic rounds that helped in counteracting E-type mutamycete BOWs were also a part of his contributions, albeit indirectly through his HCF team back in 2000 when they first collaborated with the Connections to help create the A through D series mutamycete that would then inform the creation of the E-type mutamycete. Blue Umbrella gained access to this research after Wesker's death in 2009, allowing them to develop the anti-mutamycete weaponry that Chris Redfield would be equipped with in 2017. It's crazy just how much old Capcom cared about their old games and linked them together in such a fashion. But back on track, Wesker's ultimate goal through such research was to allow himself to stand on top of the world through possessing effective countermeasure weapons under any circumstances for any situation. This research had taken him years, was kept strictly private, and never shared with his colleagues and followers at the rival company. And I can definitely understand the secrecy given how much Oswald E. Spencer's allies betrayed one another, like with William Birkin and James Marcus. Wesker had accelerated the BOW arms race in 2003 by purposely leaking the perfected T-Virus he had stolen from Umbrella's Caucasus laboratory onto the black market, which eventually allowed terrorists, rogue states, and clandestine organizations to possess it and do research and extrapolations for their own benefits. This is indicated in a deleted ending dialogue for the Dark Legacy scenario in Resident Evil: The Umbrella Chronicles. The exact dialogue is this: the total summation of all viral weaponry, the perfect strain of the T-Virus, the last achievement of a dying Umbrella. The first step will be to flood the black market with it, filling the world with the fear of bioterrorism. This is where the next step in my plan will begin. It's also important to note that during the events of Umbrella Chronicles, Wesker had downloaded a copy of Umbrella's development data in archives from the UMF-013 mainframe when he was infiltrating Umbrella's Caucasus laboratory. The data included everything on the T-Virus project, other various viral strains, detailed information on differing company branches, facilities and employees, an expansive customer portfolio, a list of potential contacts, clients and index of facility locations, and complexes and storage hangars. Once the data was copied, Wesker had erased everything, leaving Spencer's original Umbrella with nothing that could help in reviving themselves. Oh, and in case you're wondering, the data that Wesker downloaded didn't have the source location of the progenitor virus in West Africa and any information related to Project W and the Wesker children. When Wesker Wesker reported back to the rival organization he did not tell them about the data he stole. Wesker himself was rising in power within the rival organization, and the data was one of the key factors that contributed to this gain in power. Wesker also played an anonymous hand in bringing down Spencer's original umbrella through a court process by striking a deal with the US government that would allow him to testify anonymously with immunity from prosecution in exchange for providing evidence from the stolen data to the Supreme Court, which would provide irrefutable proof that Umbrella was behind the Raccoon City incident. With this new evidence, the courts were able to shut down Spencer's original umbrella once and for all. Wesker's act was all part of his revenge against Spencer and for his own plans. This then leads into what I'm saying about the rival organization being Blue Umbrella. Wesker had planned on taking control of the rival organization and evolving it into a new umbrella in his own image. This particular umbrella would not focus on pharmaceuticals, but instead be focused solely on the production of BOWs and anti-BOW technology. The essence of this seemingly contradictory research on physical weapons and total neutralization was to prepare effective countermeasure weapons under any circumstance. In other words, his goal was to mitigate the contradiction. His new umbrella would effectively serve as a private military company that would be ready to ignite the fuse on bioterror warfare, then control both sides of the conflict, allowing this umbrella to be the most dominant and powerful organization on the planet. This is why Blue Umbrella is referred to as Umbrella Corporation PMC. I'm honestly annoyed that they didn't try to focus on Blue Umbrella in Resident Evil Village, but I guess their influence spreading into the BSAA was their way of contributing to the story point, or maybe the BSAA's corruption was independent of Blue Umbrella. I don't know. I just hope the rumors that Blue Umbrella returns in Resident Evil 9 are true. Continuing on with this discussion, not long after the original Umbrella Corporation collapsed, ex-Umbrella employees who had no knowledge of the organization's dark side wanted to atone for Umbrella's crime. Wesker saw this as a way to spearhead the resurrection of Umbrella in his own image, using their sincere and good-willed intentions as the public face of the enterprise. Through using an alias or a trusted associate, Wesker had arranged for a Chapter 11 reorganization petition to be submitted to the bankruptcy court to preserve and build Umbrella's assets through the process of reorganization, joining forces with the growing movement of former Umbrella employees. They were confident that if they could appease the creditors and the courts, they could become new chief executives and begin work creating anti-BOW measures solely for cleaning up the mess the original company made. Wesker's pseudonym or chosen source became the debtor responsible for all the red tape and legal costs to finance the ongoing reorganization proposal. But once the new organization was active, the former Umbrella employees would perform the bulk of the plan, working on new technologies and anti-BOW weapons based on Wesker's research, whilst remaining completely unaware their good intentions were once again being used for more nefarious purposes. It was a very audacious and ambitious plan, and something that attracted extreme public scrutiny. A controversial decision was made to retain the name Umbrella for the new PMC, aimed at being a statement of intent in accepting full responsibility for the original corporation's crimes and a promise to clean up the mess they made. But the key aspect of the entire plan hinged on persuading the US government of their honorable intentions, for they still held the seized Umbrella assets indefinitely. After the controversial Chapter 11 application was submitted, the pre-confirmation phase began. While this reorganization application was being considered, unfortunately, Wesker started acting out. This was due to the subliminal implants that were placed upon him as a child as part of Project W, which caused him to try to seek Oswald E. Spencer out. Because of Spencer removing himself from Umbrella's operations and seeking refuge in secret in order to elude his enemies, the FBI and Russian authorities, Wesker had to use a lot of the rival company's resources to find Spencer, but to no avail. And it was only when Spencer wanted to be found by Wesker that Wesker actually found him. Spencer had used Ricardo Irving to pass on his location to Ada Wong, who then made sure that Wesker would get the information. This is what led to the events of the Lost in Nightmares DLC from Resident Evil 5 that took place in August of 2006, with Spencer's death and Albert Wesker seemingly dead. This supposed death left the rival organization in disarray, with Wesker's loyal followers in limbo, left in charge of a crippled company, and a new Umbrella PMC empire that was close to being completed but without a leader. Wesker's followers eventually became the new executives once the Chapter 11 plan was approved. And it's important to note that Wesker's new knowledge from Spencer regarding his origins led to new revelations, leading to the creation of the Ouroboros virus and his desire to rule over humanity as a god, viewing humanity as nothing more than a disease that needed to be wiped out with only a worthy chosen few to remain. Essentially, Wesker began to adopt Spencer's mindset on becoming a god, but reimagined into something more befitting for Wesker's ambitions. With Wesker's entire mindscape changed, he had no need for Umbrella PMC. Of course, in Resident Evil 4 Remilk, for some reason, he's already creating the Ouroboros virus, which makes no sense because he hasn't met Spencer yet. And at this point, he should be focused focusing on Umbrella PMC's development, but apparently not. That's definitely an indication that Resident Evil 4 Remilk and the rest of the remakes, minus Resident Evil 1 Remilk, are in an alternate timeline, and it's also an indication of how much New Capcom are trying to distance themselves from their own franchise, which is seriously stupid. But eventually, in 2007 of the canon timeline, the pre-confirmation phase of the reorganization was complete, allowing Umbrella PMC/Blue Umbrella to be formally established. There are a lot more details about them after their establishment, including little details like how Umbrella PMC supplied CCTV footage to the BSAA of Glenn Arias' animality virus infectees attacking civilians in Resident Evil Vendetta. But the most important thing is that while Blue Umbrella did use Wesker's research for their honorable anti-BOW work, the new executives comprised of Wesker's former subordinates in the rival company launched a secret branch of the corporation that is unknown to the regular employees for the production of BOWs and for building up contacts in the BOW underworld. This secret branch is explored in Resident Evil Umbrella Corps, and based on the controversy surrounding the BSAA's partnership with Blue Umbrella in Resident Evil 7 with Operation Lurking Fear in 2017, as well as the BSAA now being a rotten, ruined organization in Resident Evil Village by 2021, it's clear that this secret branch's influence is growing. Of course, by 2037, they're probably defeated, as we don't hear them whatsoever in the Shadows of Rose DLC, but based on all this, you can clearly see that Resident Evil 4 OG has huge ties to Resident Evil 7 because of Umbrella. Blue Umbrella didn't just appear out of nowhere, they were actually mentioned in Resident Evil 4 OG. Old Capcom really focused on the overarching narrative and Wesker's influence greatly. That is awesome! And New Capcom is just ignoring all of that and then making the Remilk's canonicity ambiguous for some stupid reason. New Capcom is just handling themselves in Resident Evil poorly. It's insulting. They make no mention of Umbrella PMC in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. They have Wesker focusing on Ouroboros already, which makes no sense and shouldn't be happening when he hasn't met Spencer yet, and this grand goal shouldn't be crossing his mind when he's supposedly working for the rival organization, and the rival organization isn't mentioned once in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. You call this improved storytelling? Throwing away story details that could have been reimagined into something interesting? New Capcom is clearly happy with half-assed work, and they clearly don't know their own lore, or they're too lazy to look back at it. And the funny thing is, I'm saying this, yet they had released Survive Magazine 18 in March of 2023, which seems to include details that expand upon the canon timeline instead of the Remilk timeline. They even mention Adam Benford in this issue, and that he was the CIA director back around 2002. How odd that they would mention him here, yet not include him in Resident Evil 4 Remilk. It's like two sides of the spectrum with New Capcom's conduct regarding the lore. With all that said, we can now move on from Krauser and continue with the rest of Resident Evil 4 Remilk.